Hi, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Talk More Talk. This is a solo Beatles videocast. We talk about John, Paul, George, and Ringo, usually after the breakup, but sometimes also when they were together, such as evidenced recently with the big release of Peter Jackson's wonderful docuseries Get Back. I'm Joe Mayo, and you probably know me from my YouTube channel, Mean Mr. Mayo. And before we get started here, I'm going to introduce my co-hosts, and we have a guest. Let's start with the queen of all Beatles media. I used to call her the Sun Queen, but I haven't said that in a while. So, hey, Sun Queen, we're going to talk about a couple of her books that I got committed to memory. Let's see if I got them written down just in case I forget them. Of course, we got don't make me laugh. Michael Jackson, FAQ, songs we were singing, guided tours through the Beatles' lesser-known tracks, and fandom and the Beatles, which I have handy. The act you've known for all these years, with Ken Womack, also.
Mm.
Very
Okay,
good.
it's Kit O'Toole. Hi, Kit.
Hi, Joe. Hello, Tom, Ken, and our special guest, which we'll reveal in just in just a moment.
Yeah, and I'll
We're
try to
glad to
move it
be with
along
you all.
so he doesn't have to wait too long.
Yep.
Okay, next up, we have.
Don't let them wait too long.
I was
Yeah.
going to say that.
I set that up pretty good. Yeah, right?
Yes, you did.
Not intentionally, but it just worked
Right,
out that
right.
way.
Well,
Okay, we have one of the hosts from the Paul McCartney centric podcast, Two Legs. Andy Nichols is one of the hosts, and we have here on Talk More Talk our regular buddy, Tom Hagnotti. Hey, Tom.
hey, Joe, Ken, Kit, and our wonderful guest. Looking forward to talking some George Harrison today.
There you go. Next up, he's chalked up nearly 40 years, right, in radio. And his syndicated Beatles show is called Every Little Thing, which I don't know if I ever told you, but I used to do things when I was younger, putting a lot of Beatles songs, usually A to Z and stuff, solo and group. And I used to call my series Every Little Thing. So it's very appropriate for that. I'm not saying you stole it from me. I just
This
I
is
like
weird. This is very Twilight Zone-ish at this moment.
Every Little Thing. Good title. And of course, he also has a podcast called Things We Said Today. And if you haven't checked it out already, it's on YouTube and other places. But on YouTube, you can go over there and you can see it. It's a nearly 4 hour interview with Peter Jackson.
It's amazing.
About Get Back.
Great.
And,
Yeah.
Still can't believe it happened.
Yeah, you have to see it.
Yeah.
And he has a YouTube channel called Ken Michaels Radio, and I'm talking, of course, about Ken Michaels. Hello, Ken.
Hey, Joe, Kit, Tom,
Mm.
special guest,
Let's get to our
and
special
everybody
guest.
out there in TV land.
Tonight. He's the one where you say last but not least. And our special guest, he's the author of The Beatles Let It Be, which is one of the 33 and a third series of books, which Kid is holding up. I believe you did another one called Dylan. Am I right?
That's not part of the 33 and a third series, but my first book is on Bob Dylan.
And there you go. But if this was a Bob Dylan, show, we'd be able to talk all about that. I like Dylan, but I'm talking about the author and friend of ours, Steve Matteo. Hello, Steve. Welcome.
Hi, thanks a lot. It's great to be here.
Great to have you.
And
Yeah.
Awesome.
as one of I think Tom was alluding to, we're going to be talking about George Harrison on this show. But before we do, we have Ken Michaels and the news. So Ken, take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you, Joe. This is something I really learned about in the last couple of days. With special thanks to two of our listeners, Kevin Tobin and Adam Wobken. We learned that Ringo Starr is on a new charity album that's been released called Songs from Quarantine Volume 2, released by the Music Health Alliance Corporation. It includes 14 songs from various artists to benefit the Music Health Alliance, an organization that offers support to the music community nationwide, including critical mental health and COVID-19 resources, in addition to access to healthcare, medicines, diagnostic tests, health-related debt relief, and more. And Ringo has covered the 50s rocker, See You Later, Alligator, on this compilation. And that was a hit in 1955 for Bill Haley and his comments. And that on his last EP, he covered "Rock Around the Clock." His EP
You know,
changed the world.
Ken, somebody said that on one of my videos, he put it in a comment, and I thought they were being sarcastic as a knock against him doing Rock Around the Clock. I didn't know it was legitimate. So
No, this is
now I
really
know.
true. Yeah, but maybe Ringo has Bill Haley on the brain at the moment.
Yeah.
But 2 covers of Bill Haley classics that he's just released. And other artists on this new compilation include Sheryl Crow, Guy Clark, Shelby Lynne, Rodney Crowell, Willie Nelson, and others. I haven't seen it listed on Amazon, but it is available digitally through Rodney Crowell's Bandcamp page. So you could actually find the link to purchase it on our Facebook page for Talk More Talk. I put it there a couple hours ago, and also on my Facebook page for Ken Michaels. The Beatles Let It Be album, which with its archival edition, had re-entered the top 10 in its first week of release at number 7, had already dropped down to 137 on Billboard's top 200 charts, but this week jumps back to number 80.
Oh,
No
good.
doubt, yeah, from all the attention of Get Back on the Disney Plus channel. Now, I didn't know about this till Tom just sent me the link, but we note, this is very ironic since we're doing a show tonight on George Harrison, which we're doing because of the 20th anniversary of George's passing, which was November 29th. But we note the passing of Dennis O'Brien. Dennis was the co-founder of Handmade Films, and he was 80 years old. He was also George's business manager, and Handmade was in business from 1978 through 1991. This partnership ended up in court. O'Brien was ordered by a California judge in 1996 to pay George damages of $11 million for alleged mismanagement of the company finances. And 3 months before George died, a judge rejected George's effort to stop O'Brien from declaring bankruptcy. So it did not end on a good note, the relationship between George and Dennis O'Brien. But if you've seen the documentary, hold it up there, Tom. He's always ready. An Accidental Studio, which came out a couple of years ago. Really a great documentary on Handmade Films. It goes into detail on this, and Dennis really had visions of grandeur for this company. And I think he was far more aggressive. He wanted, to have blockbuster films.
Right.
And George was more concerned about making nice little films that made some profit. He didn't really care about it being the biggest film company in the world, but Dennis did. So evidently there were financial problems, and it's very sad.
It sucks when both people aren't on the same page,
Yeah.
Stuff like that can happen all the time. But yeah, they do cover it in the documentary, and I do recommend, if you haven't seen it yet, please, you can still probably get the Blu-ray or DVD on Amazon. So check it out.
Yeah. I think most of us, even the biggest of Beatle fans, haven't seen the great majority of Handmade Films that were made. I mean, for me, obviously, Life of Brian, and you got to give, everything started.
Time Bandits,
Time Bandits, Mona Lisa, great stuff. Yeah,
and of course, Shanghai Surprise. But there were a whole bunch of other films that did really well in England, and Handmade Films was actually like one of the top 2 or 3 film companies. Did really well for that period of time until towards the end. Anyway, so speaking of charities, as we mentioned, the new compilation that Ringo's on, Beatle Fan reports that a collectible limited edition has been made available by Yoko Ono and Sean Ono Lennon of 50 12-inch vinyl acetates of John and Yoko's festive single Happy Christmas War Is Over. It was released yesterday, December 5th, to mark the 50th anniversary of the original recording and release in 1971. The first 25 acetates will be given to hand-picked music charities and nonprofit and grassroots organizations who do great work across the UK music scene. The other 25 acetates will be available at select record shops across the UK in cities including Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, Edinburgh, Dundee, Belfast, London, and others. Really great idea to give it out.
Some people have been showing them on Twitter,
Really?
yesterday. Yeah, showing that they've got it. Looks really nice.
Okay, great idea.
Mm.
Mary McCartney appeared on Morning Joe. That's Joe Scarborough's morning show on MSNBC this morning. Mary is the host of a vegetarian cooking show on Discovery Plus called Mary McCartney Serves It Up, now starting its second season. Mary was interviewed by Joe and his staff and spoke about being brought up as a vegetarian and that it was never anything that was forced on the family. And it's something she's always felt comfortable with. She enjoys making very quick, easy meals for people. Each of her shows has her cooking 4 recipes, followed by an interview with a celebrity. Mary also says she likes to make meals for her guests and friends that cater to their specific favorite flavors. She also spoke of her love for photography, which came from her mother. She's been able to take some great photos, especially portrait shots and celebrities in a casual atmosphere. Very good interview this morning on MSNBC. And, this could have been the #1 news story. We are very proud to announce that our colleague and frequent fifth member of Talk More Talk, Ken Womack, will be releasing 2 books on the Beatles road manager, friend, and confidant, Mal Evans. All right, we can all applaud. Let's all applaud him.
Mal's legacy is in good hands.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely. The first volume is a full-length biography on Mal coming out in 2023. The second will include Evans' diaries, manuscripts, and numerous other artifacts from the family archives coming out in 2024. According to its press release, for decades, the mystery surrounding Evans' treasure trove of unreleased material has left Beatle fans and music historians alike longing for a glimpse into the life and times of this most devoted friend among their inner circle. Mal Evans is also seen as a central figure in the footage in Peter Jackson's new Get Back docuseries. In 2020, the Evans family turned to leading Beatles authority, Ken Womack, to bring Mal's archives to the world. Evans' vast, never-before-seen archive includes diaries, manuscripts, and photographs associated with the Beatles and is viewed as a holy grail when it comes to understanding the band's unparalleled legacy. Now, Gary Evans, that's Mal's son, says, "My dad meant the world to me. He was my hero. Before Ken joined the project, I thought I knew the story of my dad, but what I knew was in monochrome. 15 months later, it is like The Wizard of Oz, which was Dad's favorite film, because Ken has added so much color, so much light to his story. Ken has shown me that Dad was the Beatles' greatest friend. He was lucky to meet them, but they had more good fortune with Dad walking down the cavern steps for the first time." What I've discovered, what Ken says, what I've discovered in this archive is more than I could have ever truly imagined. I am honored and thrilled to present this biography and accompanying materials with the historical integrity that they deserve. And with Ken working on this, you're going to get top quality all the way with these books. For so long, we've been wondering what's in these diaries, and Mal had plans of releasing them. But unfortunately, he was killed in 1975 or 76.
I think
in January.
76.
Yeah, and it never happened. But now it's finally going to come out. We'll still have to wait a little while, but it's worth the wait.
He's
And it's
working
going
on
to
it.
be fresh material. I mean, stuff we haven't had a lot on, a person that I'm interested in reading a lot about, because it's not the stuff we've been through a lot.
Right. Plus, it's coming from an insider.
Yep.
Insider.
Son,
Exactly.
you can't get more inside than that.
Yeah.
I mean, short of Neil Aspinall, who obviously we'll never see anything from, I think Mal would be, the best person. And Ken is certainly, I couldn't think of a better person than Ken. It was great because Ken and I have gotten to know each other over the years, and he contacted me whenever it was and asked me to supply a chapter for the Beatles in Context book.
Yep.
So that was great being part of that. Having him contact me and want me to be in it was, really an honor. And he's such a great guy. He doesn't sleep, of course.
No, never.
Just works all the time.
Yep.
But nonetheless, he's a sweetheart, and I can't wait for this book. It'll be great. Both books.
Either.
Both.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a big part of Beatles history that we obviously know about Mal in terms of, what we've read and other people have said. But now we get to hear, in his own words through the diaries, and manuscripts that were published. This is big. This is going
and
to
we'll find out possibly what Beatles songs he wrote.
Yeah, that's right. Who knows?
If he did, maybe it was a line or two. You don't know.
Yeah.
We'll find out for sure. He was a part of everything from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Right.
Once once it's all started at the Cavern. Anyway, Paul McCartney is being nominated for 2 Grammy Awards for the upcoming ceremonies taking place at the Crypto.com Arena in Los Angeles, January 31st. Paul is being nominated for Best Rock Song with Find My Way, which ironically, do you know about this? It's competing with the song All My Favorite Songs by Weezer, which is partly written by Ilse Juber, the daughter of Lawrence and Hope Juber. So Paul is competing with the offspring of a member of Wings.
I do believe
Also,
the George Harrison crate has been nominated as well.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know
Really?
that.
Yeah, historical
What is that, most
packages or
expensive,
something
yeah,
like that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, most expensive.
I say it should win.
Yeah, it should win that. Yeah.
I think it's
I wasn't aware of that.
packaging, archival album packaging, I think is what it is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very
Wow.
nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, Paul is nominated for Best Rock Album from
All
McCartney
right.
3.
All right.
And in the composing arranging category, a new orchestral arrangement of Eleanor Rigby by Cody Fry is nominated for Best Arrangement, Instruments, and Vocals. That's an Arrangers Award. Okay. So all that to look forward to at the Grammys. So Paul wins something.
Yeah.
And
He's
the
118.
Harrison box.
Yeah. I think he's 118, so he's doing pretty good.
Well, he needs more. Rolling Stone is reporting that The Edge and producer Bob Ezrin have assembled a massive guitar collection from the likes of Paul McCartney, Rush, Radiohead, Bruce Springsteen, Ron Wood, Joe Walsh, and others to benefit Music Rising, a charity they started in 2005 to aid musicians that were devastated by Hurricane Katrina. And Paul is donating his Yamaha BB1200 electric bass guitar that he played in concert during Wings tours of the late 70s. It's called Guitar Icons, a musical instrument auction to benefit Music Rising. And it's called, it will take place, on December the 11th at Von Easton Galleries in Los Angeles. But bids will be accepted through the internet. Just a few more news items here. Mike McCartney will have another new book coming out called Early Liverpool Photographic Prints. And that's due out in January. And on November 26th, we lost one of the true giants of songwriters in lyricist and composer Stephen Sondheim, who died at the age of 91. And Sondheim gave us many great musicals, such as West Side Story, Company, Sweeney Todd, Follies, and many others. Paul McCartney once revealed that the Beatles song There's a Place was inspired by the song Somewhere, or what some people refer to as There's a Place for Us from West Side Story. Paul had some very kind words to say on his Twitter account on Sondheim. He said, very sad to hear the passing of the great Stephen Sondheim. I was fortunate to meet him and chat about songwriting. He was a witty, intelligent man. Send in the Clowns is one of my favorite songs. So well crafted and beautiful with it. We have lost a great talent, but his music will live long and prosper. Goodbye, Stephen. We love you, Paul. Very nice.
Very nice.
And finally, even though it's back on November 24th, we wish a very happy 80th birthday to Pete Best, who made it to the big 80.
I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
So that's all the news. I think that's plenty.
All right.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good amount.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Ken. Well, so as we said earlier, we're going to be devoting this show to George Harrison, the legacy of George, and remembering him because it was 20 years ago that he passed from cancer, to be exact, November the 29th of 2001. So I thought I would just start, if anybody wanted to share if their memories of maybe when they heard the news of that George had passed. For me, people ask me all the time, on my channel, what did you think when George passed? For me, it's strange because, whereas somebody like John Lennon, when the tragedy that happened to John, that was a shocker I'll never forget. But with George, I kind of knew it was coming. I knew that he wasn't well for a long time. We all knew, and I kind of was just waiting to hear the unfortunate news. I knew it was only a matter of time, and because of that, for some reason, I don't have a moment where I remember hearing it. I do remember. I remember being very impressed by Paul McCartney giving a nice lengthy report to some news people who stopped him, and he was willing to get out of his Jeep or van or what he was driving, and talking about George at length, calling him his little brother and stuff like that. And I thought that was touching. That I remember very clearly. But I thought I would just go around. Well, anybody just wants to chime in if you have any thoughts or memories of that day.
Well, I know that I heard the news during the overnight. My wife and I were staying at a hotel in Massachusetts, and of course we all knew that George was ill. But I always remember George saying shortly before he died, "Don't worry, I'm not going to die on you folks just yet." And I always looked at George as being completely honest, so I thought it probably wasn't going to happen for a while. But still thinking that the moment might be near. My wife and I would very often have the TV on during the overnight anyway. And we woke up in the middle of the night to find out the news, and we just held each other and took the news really badly, even though, we knew it was coming. But, it's hard to put into words, even though it's a tragedy no matter what. Still so young. He was only 58 when he died, and such a big part of all of us, the music, all of his memories. It was a horrible thing to deal with, between that and losing John, and and Linda not too long before that too. So
Right.
yeah, so that's my memory of it.
Yeah. And even though we knew it was coming, it doesn't make it any less sad either.
Oh, no.
It was still very impactful for me, because just a year or two earlier, I was, my uncle and I, we were doing our, what if the Beatles never broke up CDs, where we were just, cramming all those, songs onto like a 70, 71 and all that stuff. So I was having a really great time discovering, a lot of the music that I hadn't listened to yet. So, all of that was still fresh in my mind, and just, being, very sad when we heard the news, and then having to go to work, and that wasn't that fun, because it was just hard to concentrate that day, just wanting to be at home and listen to his music. So yeah, that was a tough day for sure.
Yeah, I remember I was driving to class. I was working on my doctorate at the time at Northern Illinois University, and I was driving, and the news came over the radio, and I wasn't shocked, because as we've all been saying, we kind of knew this was coming. And I remember Beatle Fan was reporting on some of this stuff too. We'd heard, he had been going for experimental treatments in Switzerland. We'd heard that, that Paul and Ringo had been paying him visits, and you just knew, this didn't sound good. And so it didn't come as a complete shock to me. But of course, incredibly sad. And I even remember, by the time I got to class, a number of my classmates knew what a big fan I was, and they were actually asking me if I was okay. It was just very sweet, very sweet. Right. And I'm like, I'm fine, because I had expected it. And I don't think it really hit me fully until a year later, when the concert for George happened. Right. And that's when it really hit me. You know, I don't know why it took that long to process. But yeah, I mean, it was just, you know, I mean, I accepted it. You know, it wasn't like, as you said, Joe, when John died. I mean, I was too young when that happened to really experience it, but it wasn't a shock. But
no,
it
still was
knew it was
incredibly
coming.
sad.
But it was incredibly
you know,
sad.
losing anyone, especially that young, you know,
exactly.
You know,
And his music meant so
remember
much.
Yeah.
Remember the moment.
Exactly. Steve, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's the same sort of thing that, you know, we knew it was coming, you know, and I mean, it doesn't make it any less, you know, devastating because he was so young. But you know, I remember one of the things that really, I don't know why this really stuck out, is you heard these stories about, you know, George just wanted to kind of be left alone in peace. Like, you know, when the Beatles were touring in 65. I mean, this is how he was, you know. And apparently one of the doctors that was attending to him was like, even when he was really sick at the end, was like making him sign guitars and things.
Yes.
Oh, right? I heard about that.
Staten Island.
Awful.
Yeah.
And I just thought, you know, like, here's a guy who, you know, he's literally on his deathbed and he's still being hounded, you know, still people just will not leave him alone and give him peace, you know. And, you know, it's a shame because, you know, John and George were so much about, you know, spirituality and peace. And they both, you know, obviously with John died violently, and with George, I mean, the situations with him where they were attacked in their own home.
George could have died violently as well.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So it was so like, you know, and then to hear the sort of, I guess the Brainwashed album was released posthumously.
Right.
Yeah.
And to hear it, you know, he was still, you know, making his points. You know, that album is, as far as the sort of this kind of central theme of it, you know, the brainwashed, or, you know, whatever that is, you can interpret it many ways. I mean, it couldn't be more relevant than it is today, you know? So it's like, he's still with us. And the other, I think, Kit, you mentioned about the concert for George. You know, I was working on the Let It Be book, I think, at that time. And I was interviewing, some of the people I interviewed had said that they were there, they were at the concert and telling me, you know, you can't believe what this felt like, you know, the feeling of it, you know. And then, of course, when I finally did get a chance to see it, you know, it is just, it's an extraordinary evening of music.
Absolutely.
Where you've got all of these people together, you know, in one night. And, you know, it's great to listen to it. I have it on, you know, Blu-ray, DVD, vinyl, CD. I mean, it's just, it's one of the most incredible concerts. That picture is great. And I love the liner notes, because the writer who did most of the liner notes is one of my favorite writers, is Paul Theroux. And I never knew that he had such a relationship with George. You know, apparently he had a really deep friendship with George, and that's why he was chosen. I mean, also obviously chosen because he's an extraordinary writer. He's an American, but he's mostly lived in England, and he writes nonfiction and fiction, which is, you know, not a thing American writers do. It is more of sort of a British thing. He's just an extraordinary writer. So that whole package to me is amazing. And, you know, I think, you know, we still miss him, just like we miss John. I mean, it's so many years later, but it's, you know, but his presence is still there. I think he still felt, you know.
You know, aside from everything you just said, which is beautiful, Steve, for me, the concert for George, apart from all the great music, is an even more special concert. Every tribute concert is special, but this was even more special to me because everybody on that stage was someone who was close to George and meant something to George. And every spectrum. I mean, you got Monty Python there, and you've got Ravi Shankar with Anushka Shankar, and you've got some traveling Wilburys in there. You know,
I'm surprised Dylan wasn't there. I've always wondered.
Was he on tour?
I think he was touring. I think
he was on tour.
He had something.
But he's always on tour. I mean, he's,
you know,
that's the
George went to
tour. That's what
Right.
Dylan does.
I was kind of like in a way hoping that he would just like do a performance, tape it and then send it,
Yeah.
and do a
Yeah.
tribute that way. And
Yeah.
but to not to have him on there was
Kind of
definitely
weird.
it
Yeah.
was weird in a way. But to Ken's point, I mean, everybody on that stage wanted to be there because they loved him. And there was like they weren't there for notoriety or for a big payday. They were there to celebrate the life of their friend.
Yeah. And it captured every kind of, well, maybe except the motocross stuff. But other than that, I mean, all the different aspects of his life.
Right.
I mean, the different sides of his personality, the humorous side, the spiritual side, the obviously rock and roll side, I mean, I just thought that was brilliant. And then, as I said, really fully processed what happened, at the end when they had Joe Brown come out and do "I'll See You in My Dreams,"
God.
and then the Delaney, another part of his personality. But yeah, when that happened, that was it. I mean, I was gone.
It was such a touching
Tissue time.
concert.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you brought it up, Steve. I mean, something I had here I wanted to talk about. I'm glad you brought it up now. I remember when I first heard of it, I was working with a guy who knew I liked Beatles stuff, and he said, "Did you see Concert for George?" And I said, "Oh, no." I said, "I don't think I'm going to bother," because I was thinking it was going to be something like some of the John tributes where you had I always joke around and say Kevin Spacey singing Mind Games or something like that.
Yeah.
And he said, "No, trust me, this is special. This is really good." And this guy's not a big raging fanatic of the Beatles or anything. I said, I'm going to try it. And oh my God, did I love that thing? I watch that at least twice a year, every year. Besides being just great performances and great songs and music in general, it's the vibe, it's the feeling, it's George's presence, spirit, it's everything. And it's a year later to the day that he passed. It's just one of those moments where lightning's captured in a bottle. Everybody is doing so well with their performances, and everybody's, as we said, a friend, had some kind of relationship to George. It's one of the greatest shows that I've ever seen. I mean, by anybody,
Absolutely.
And also to have Danny Harrison there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Who looks like, at the time, a very young George Harrison. It's like, his spirit lives on through Danny, who is his own person too. But he's more than proud of his heritage. As you can tell from how he's conducted himself in his career.
He's got his own cool band. I love that band. I mean, he's got the solo stuff, but the band, I mean, and it's three very distinct personalities there too. I mean, and Donnie holds his own with two people that have definitely been around much longer than him, making records and touring and songwriting. So, good stuff.
Definitely.
Well, okay. As we all have, we've been watching the Peter Jackson Get Back, 3 parts. I'm sure all of us have seen it.
I don't know. What are you talking about?
It's this little documentary. It'll only take you like a lunchtime to watch it. Don't. It's not very.
It'll last the lunchtime, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
That's what I thought of, right, Runnels? So, but that's on our minds now. So I thought, maybe I'll start asking questions about that kind of era, the Get Back / Let It Be era, and also tying in to your book, Steve. The Beatles Let It Be from the 33 and a third series. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the book. What you did with the book, why you just kids holding it up, what inspired you to write it, how you approached it and everything, and then we'll get into some questions about George during that period.
Sure.
Like how we felt that he was at that point.
Well, I'll just kind of give you just a quick sort of synopsis. Is I approached the editor of the series because I had heard about it, and I thought, what a great idea. At the time, there really was nothing like it, and there was only a handful of the books out. And the editor, he said, "Sure, we'd love to have you do a book. And would you like to do Bob Dylan?" And I said, "Well, I just wrote a book on Bob Dylan. I really would rather do something else. I've kind of Dylaned out at that point. I I mean, it was a biography, so I covered his whole career up until that point. And so he said, well, what are you thinking about? I said, well, what about the Beatles? He said, yeah. He goes, that would also be great because we don't have Dylan and we don't have the Beatles. And when he asked me, well, what album? I think he was a little shocked when I said, Let It Be. And I said, I know it's not their best album. I said, but it's a great story. And I said, it's very relevant, because in the news at the time, they had just recovered some of the tapes and the Phil Spector trial was going on. And I think this was before Let It Be Naked was announced, I believe. So I just knew, through the years with all these bootlegs, it was a film, everything that was going on with Apple. It was the end of the Beatles, the end of the 60s. It was more the journalist in me than the music fan sort of, made that decision. And, at the time and up until just prior to Thanksgiving weekend, you couldn't see any of this material unless you had a VHS and a VHS player, because as you all know, it's never been out on DVD, Blu-ray, or streaming. You never see it playing in any movie theaters. So, it was a great sort of, archaeological dig in some ways to go back. And then as I was interviewing people, as I was doing it, I was hearing that people were getting interviewed, that they were going to be putting it out on DVD at some point, and obviously that, it never did happen. And I mean, to answer your question about approach, obviously Let It Be is a documentary movie. So I sort of approached writing the book as if I was making a documentary, where I really was, just being the journalist. I'm not the kind of journalist who likes to put a lot of my own sort of opinions in it. I'm not into that kind of thing. I'm not a rock critic, whatever that even is. So I always prefer to be more of the historian, or, do my research and make observations and, let people make their own, sort of decisions. And this book was different because the Dylan book, I really didn't do much in the way of interviews, but with this book I did. And so I interviewed Michael Lindsay Hogg, and I interviewed Alan Parsons, and I interviewed Peter Asher and Klaus Vormann and Peter Brown and Dennis O'Dell. And, I interviewed a lot of people because I really wanted to talk to the people who were there or who were sort of around, even if they weren't involved specifically with the Let It Be album or film. But, I really wanted to let them sort of tell the story, because, they were there. And it was great because I talked to a lot of people who were at Apple and people who were at Abbey Road Studios, still called EMI at the time, obviously. One of the people I talked to said that they were there the day the Beatles showed up to audition for George Martin, which is, that's just mind blowing. And he had said that, literally their equipment was like held together with string, And, what's interesting too is all of this idea about the Peter Jackson film, about how everything that was going on during that period, it wasn't all gloom and doom. That I did discover that when I did my research, that was part of what I was hearing from certain people. And, I don't remember, who exactly it was, but they had said that, literally John would walk in a room and people would just fall on the floor laughing because he was such a cut up, because he was always just joking around. Now, we know that at different points during the making of Let It Be, he was not necessarily all with us, let's put it that way. But, I love talking to the people who were there, these people who worked with the Beatles, people who were with them on a day-to-day basis, people who knew them for years. Obviously Peter Asher knew Paul the best and knew them all for years. Peter Brown, as much as there are issues with The Love You Make, his book that he wrote with Stephen Gaines, he was there, with Brian from very much early on. When I interviewed Peter Brown, I interviewed him at his apartment in Manhattan, and he explained to me that John and Yoko would come and visit him. And he said that they were looking for a place in Manhattan. This was before they were living there. And they wanted to live in his building because they really liked it. And he said, well, there's no vacancies here, but the building next door, the Dakota, there are vacancies there, I believe. And so it was Peter Brown, who kind of, accidentally, so to speak, tipped them off to go live in the Dakota. I mean, famous people have lived in the Dakota for years. It's a place that, movie stars and people, famous, rich people have lived for years, So it was really great. It was great. Klaus Vorman told me what it was like being in the studio when John was trying to cut Instant Karma, and he was having a really rough time. And George Harrison said, well, Phil Spector's in New York. Why don't you see if Phil would come in? And Klaus said Phil walked in, and within 15 minutes, he had the sound that we all know and love of Instant Karma. And, I'm a big Phil Spector fan of his music, maybe not of the person, but, certainly the wall of sound, I mean, what Phil did for All Things Must Pass, although people feel that the credit for the sound should be shared. I know there are some that don't like the heavy-handedness of it necessarily, but then what Phil did with Imagine is very sort of different. It's very sparse. It's very much, I think what John was going for. So, that's kind of what I've done, what I did with the book. It's still in print all these years later. It was published in 2004. It's been translated into Japanese, into Italian. It's been anthologized. There's things, of it now I realize maybe aren't completely accurate. Not that they're not factual, but there's more context to it, or maybe there's things I would have approached a different way. It was a long time ago. So, but people seem to like it. It is in print. It's a great series.
That's what I was going to say. 33 and a Third. This is a terrific series.
Still around.
It's still around, and that takes in-depth looks and really analyzes how classic albums were made. And I think this is a really nice compliment. Even that, you said it was 2003, 2004, but still, I think this is a great compliment to Get Back, because it does, well, first of all, like you said, a lot of it still squares with what Get Back talks about, that it wasn't all gloom and doom and so forth. But it is, I think, a very nice compliment to Get Back in that, chronicling the sessions, what happened. You've got all the perspectives of people who are there, many of whom appear in the documentary.
Yes.
So I mean, definitely, I think this is a great addition to any fan's library, and definitely recommend you check it out.
Thank you. I think in some ways it's almost like an introduction more, because it is a short book. That's the whole idea of the series, is not to write these comprehensive compendiums. It really was more of, I think it's a good compliment, like particularly with what Doug Sulpy has given. I mean, he's provided a lot of the raw sort of, raw material. And now, obviously with the 50th anniversary, there's been some books that have, gone into this territory, adding to it. I'm a big fan of the more the merrier. The more you can get on a particular period, or an artist, or whatever the case may be. I just think this is hopefully a valuable part of the canon. It's certainly not definitive by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay. Well, I think Peter Jackson agrees with you. The more the merrier when it comes to how much you could delve into something. So let's talk about George during that period, because I've always felt, and I think most people would agree, that George, to me, that was a peak of sorts for him that time, 68, 69, 70, and he's kind of still trapped in with the Lennon and McCartney mystique. He's still kind of being squeezed in a way that he can't really do what he'd like to do. And then there's of course that moment in the Get Back footage where we see that he says he has enough for like the next 10 albums, enough material, and he might want to do his own solo album and everything. And it must be an insurmountable thing to have to deal with how great as Lennon and McCartney were, and you're in there. So let's talk about that a little bit. Kit, what do you think? Let's talk about your feelings on George at that point.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, watching Get Back, that George's sort of I don't know, development during this period, watching it during Get Back. That was one of the most fascinating aspects of the documentary, and there were many fascinating aspects of this documentary, but that was one of them that you really saw him. I mean, obviously in that first episode, you saw his frustration, that he had. Great. I mean, he was coming up with these songs, and he, now I think he also had personal stuff going on, outside the Beatles. We've talked about that. But he was feeling, I think, that his material was being overlooked. I think, also felt, Paul was taking over at times and we could debate whether that was justified or not, but he felt that way. And then, of course, the whole thing with Michael Lindsay Hogg, kept saying, so are we going to do this concert in Libya or what? I kept saying that, and George saying, I don't want to do this concert. And he felt like he wasn't being listened to. And, you could just see the pot gradually coming to a boil. I mean, you just saw it coming. And, but then to see when he, eventually came back after negotiating and everything, I think you could really see this, confidence starting to come out, and you could really see him enjoying recording Old Brown Shoe. I mean, to see him really getting into that, having a great time. And then that conversation that you just mentioned, Joe, with John and Yoko. I mean, I practically was cheering his screen when he was saying he had all this stuff, and he said, I thought about, paraphrasing here, I thought about giving this away to other artists, but I decided I need to do something for me,
right?
And I just thought, right on. I mean, it was, you just, and of course you knew that was going to be All Things Must Pass. And so I just think he, this was a time of, a real crossroads for him. I mean, he was working, with other artists. He was, and I think he, maybe was still a bit nervous of leaving the Beatles cocoon in a way. But on the other hand, I think he was starting to say, hey, I'm writing stuff that's as good as Lennon, McCartney, and it's time for me to get out there and do my own, start my own career. And so it was fascinating to see that and develop in the course of the film.
And I do think it was, for me, it was getting as good as Lennon and McCartney.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of people say, oh, well, it's never quite up to that. In fact, George Martin said something to the effect of, right, John and Paul are like our main songwriters.
Yeah.
And George is his own kind of thing. But I mean, with songs like While My Guitar Gently Weeps and, and Something, and All Things Must Pass, and everything he was working on at that time.
Here Comes the Sun.
Here Comes the Sun, which is
pretty darn good.
Just ask anybody now. It's right. It's the most streamed Beatles song. Here Comes the Sun. So that's become the biggest.
Yeah, there's an interview clip, an audio clip that I have of George Martin saying, the first time when George really wrote something that knocked me out was Here Comes the Sun. I mean, that's the first time. It just goes to show
it wasn't Don't Bother Me.
But something, Within You Without You is a song that I bring up every now and then on this show as one that I now look upon as being such an absolute masterpiece. It was way over my head when it first came out. I was a little kid. Even in my adulthood, I couldn't understand what this song was all about. But when you think about all the work that was put into that, not only from George Harrison as a song and all the Eastern philosophy and the beautiful words and lyrics, but George Martin did a ton of work on Within You Without You in adding the Western and Eastern instruments. How did he even know, how to score Eastern instruments? Somehow he knew that too. But while he's doing this, George Martin, he's not recognizing the brilliance of Within You Without You. I mean, we could talk all you want about While My Guitar Gently Weeps, which is no doubt about it, one of their greatest songs. But even, before that, you've got Taxman and If I Needed Someone and a lot of great stuff coming out of George. But considering all the work that George Martin poured into Within You Without You, you'd think he'd recognize you know, what an amazing song that was at the
Yeah.
time. But even George Martin admitted later on that, he wasn't very fair to George.
Mm.
Yeah.
And it's very apparent.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is they just look down on him. It seems like most of the time, especially during that month. Partly at Twickenham and then at their studio. But it is, we talked to Chris Thomas who saw the frustration right when we talked to him in 2018.
Yeah.
I think Ken, you had Patty on, didn't you? On things we said
Yeah.
today, and then she had talked about the frustration that George was having a little bit on that episode as well. But I also feel from seeing the Get Back that you can tell that he was frustrated himself about certain things, and we saw him talk about it, not being able to improvise like an Eric Clapton
Right.
would have been able to be or would have able to do, and so therefore maybe that process of Get Back, of where we're going to write 14 songs and record them and then perform them live on the spot, maybe that wasn't the right process for him, and maybe that had something to do with him leaving, maybe. But also, like Kit said, maybe home stuff, and then maybe him seeing John and Paul doing their face-to-face a bit, and how well they were working together at that point in time. And I just hear, you just see George just strumming something. He's not really, getting in there or contributing because maybe he feels like he can't. But it is amazing, though, that out of that, then you probably get arguably the two best songs on Abbey Road in something, and Here Comes the Sun. And then also during that month of January, he's got almost half of All Things Must Pass started. He leaves the band and starts working on Wah Wah. It's just, all of this creativity that he's creating, while all this frustration is building up. And I'm glad he didn't, because he was giving songs away. I think Joe Cocker got something first as well, right?
But he didn't release it till after the Beatles version came
right. And then Billy Preston got My Sweet Lord first, and I think there was one other one, All Things Must Pass, I think it was. But I'm glad that he went for it. He took his material seriously to where, he was, had enough confidence to do that so well, because it's arguably the greatest solo record there is. So it's very interesting to see George throughout that whole 8-hour documentary, but it's fascinating, really is. It's something that could be examined for years, really.
Yes.
To study George Harrison in 69 and 1970 is beyond fascinating.
Yeah.
And it's a very complicated time for him. And you mentioned the word crossroads, which is perfect, Kit, for this time, because not only did he feel this frustration in only getting a couple of songs per Beatle album, but at the same time, I don't think he really wanted the Beatles to break up. And even after John made the announcement that he wanted a divorce, and Paul issued the statement that went with the first McCartney album, George was still talking to the press about there being possibly another album.
Right.
And when you think about the fact that George was more vested in Apple than anybody, any of the Beatles, he did more work producing other artists, playing for them. He was responsible for bringing Jackie Lomax to the label, for helping Billy Preston get a record contract, the Radha Krishna Temple, Doris Troy, all these artists. He's also doing that thinking that, well, probably the Beatles are going to continue anyway. And one thing that Peter Jackson said in other interviews, though not in ours, on things we said today, is that apparently George said to John, and Paul wasn't there when he said this, how would you feel about my making a solo album and we still go back to doing, Beatles at the same time?
That in the documentary.
And John seemed to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And when Peter talked to Paul lately, Peter to Paul, Paul said he didn't know that, but he would have been in favor of that. So I don't think George was necessarily thinking, I want the Beatles to break up. I think he still wanted them to continue. He could do solo music. He could help out Apple artists. The mere fact that he was so giving of his time for other artists meant that he was all for Apple, which was the Beatles' own company and project to begin with. So I think he really wanted the Beatles to continue, but at some point, when nothing's happening with the group, he has to start recording All Things Must Pass.
Yeah.
And then he really enjoyed that whole process.
That's an interesting take, Ken. I never really looked at it that way. And it's fascinating and it makes sense. And it made me think too that, he was involved with soundtrack music at that point too, because they did the Raga soundtrack. That was an Apple project,
Right.
and they ended up being involved with that movie. So, yeah, there you go.
And
Wonderwall, right?
He's always on it.
He had been the film and the soundtrack thing. The thing I was thinking about, I think when Kit was talking, another thing is, John and Paul, even though they were not writing together like they used to, they still kind of had each other to bounce off of, where George didn't have that natural person to bounce off with. I mean, I think in some respects, there was a little reaching out, with Ringo in that respect. In the Peter Jackson documentary, you see Ringo's just starting to come up with, I think it's Octopus's Garden.
Yeah.
Yep.
And George is kind of encouraging him, and he's there with him, and what George would do with It Don't Come Easy, So I guess George did the demo, I believe, for It Don't Come Easy, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Well,
because there
did
is a demo,
the guide vocal,
the guide
with
vocal,
George doing it,
Yeah.
which I've heard.
yeah.
And is that available? I've always wondered, is that other than bootlegs? Is that
It's
on?
bootleg.
It's
No,
not,
it's
it's not
not
available
on a-
anywhere
not on a
legitimately.
commercial release.
I'm surprised because you do hear it often, in different places. But I should probably just say this: All Things Must Pass, for me, the album, is my favorite album of all time by anyone.
Oh, it's
Period.
amazing.
Wow.
And I know people, when I say that, are often a little shocked because they know I'm a big Beatles fan. So they would think, well, wouldn't it be like, Sgt. Pepper or Abbey Road or something? Or I'm also a big Who fan. So, gee, wouldn't it be like Tommy or, Who's Next or whatever or something? But, for me, and it's something that it came to me through the years, that it became, this is my favorite album. It may not be the best album anybody's ever made, but for me, in terms of lyrically what it's about, and then that sound of that record. And I know some people don't like the wall of sound or whatever it is. And, I was speaking recently with, I'm sure you probably all know Jason Krupa, obviously.
Yeah, he's been on our show.
Yeah. And he was
Just
saying
on.
that he felt that, especially the orchestrations on All Things Must Pass, is really more George working with the person who was the orchestrator, not Phil Spector, who was sort of dictating that sound. And when I interviewed Ken Scott for my Let It Be book, he was sort of feeling, well, no, it wasn't Phil. It was really me and George who were coming up with the sound. So I'm sure it's really a sort of a composite of all of the people working together. But I think ultimately it's George's album, and he's saying what he wants, and I think Spector, when he worked with the Beatles individually, I think he was, sensitive to them being the boss and calling the shots, where it isn't, I'm Phil Spector, I'm used to running the show sort of thing. I would, I'd be interested to hear what any of you think about that, if that's accurate, or that's your feeling.
I think you're right. Especially because you mentioned like the huge difference in the production between All Things Must Pass and Imagine. I think whichever Beatle he worked with dictated what he wanted. And certainly Phil had some influence, but still there's a huge contrast in the production styles.
And that's a good
Beatles with Phil.
Yeah, that's a good point. And if you read Ken and Jason's book, and of course we did a show on that. Now,
I haven't. I haven't read it yet. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, you'll love it. You'll love it. And their book strongly supports what you just said, because definitely George was. I mean, in some ways he was, a little, struggling with some confidence, issues throughout that, but he was, he really knew what he wanted. And there were times where he was very much in charge, and Phil, I think, wasn't there at
Yeah.
times. So I think he was very much dictating this is what he wanted in the orchestration and so forth. Yeah.
It's interesting how that album too becomes part of this sort of whole bunch of other records, including obviously Layla, Derek and the Dominoes,
Yeah.
you know, Mad Dogs and Englishmen, you know, Joe Cocker, you know, Leon Russell. On these albums, you've got a lot of the same players, you know. I mean, for the first time, the guys in Derek and the Dominoes are together on All Things Must Pass. And apparently the story goes that there was some extra studio time, and Spector did some recordings with Derek and the Dominoes that, you know, never were officially released until the recent reissues of All Things Must Pass. So you have this kind of whole scene going on, and really George is really kind of he's really at the center of it in a lot of ways. You know, you've got the Delaney and Bonnie and Friends,
Sure.
you know, so if you take those albums and you look at the liner notes, you see a lot of the same players are on these records, you know, as they've done reissues too of like Blind Faith and Derek and the Dominoes and you know, these different groups, Delaney and Bonnie. You see George turning up on some of these reissues where he played on some of the sessions, but he wasn't on the final albums. So you've really got all of this sort of cross-fertilization, and it's, you know, it's kind of hands across the water, you know, where you've got all these American players and you've got all these British players. I mean, Derek and the Dominoes is one Brit, you know, which is Eric Clapton, and the other three are they're all Americans, you know. So it's really, I love this stuff. It's a fascinating period, you know, it really is, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
for sure. And I like Steve, you said it's your favorite album of all, right? Of all time, which made me think of someone else here that I'd like to kind of branch over to. And he's nodding already, because I was going to ask about this type of thing, different albums we enjoy by George. And Ken, why don't you tell us about, I won't spoil it, I'll let you tell what you like, your favorite album and so forth.
My favorite album of all time for many artists is Living in the Material World.
Okay.
And
Great
I think
album. I love it.
Yeah, the thing about George is that I think his music, especially the things he said and how deeply personal and spiritual it was, if you're a younger person, you're not going to grasp it as much. I think with maturity, you grow to respect the music so much more. I think George's music sounds better with age because of so many of the things that he said in his music.
I'll drink to that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, Living in the Material World has some of the same spiritual themes of All Things Must Pass without the Phil Spector production, except for Try Some Buy Some. But, you know, it's the songs on Living in the Material World, and I always point out The Light That Has Lighted the World, Who Can See It, Be Here Now, which is like a mantra, you know, a very slow mantra. So powerful with so few words. Those are amongst the most powerful songs I think he's ever written, you know. And as someone who's a big lover of love songs and ballads, I think of That Is All as being, you know, possibly his greatest love song, you know, on a par really with Something, only it's just not as well known. But yeah, I love everything about Living in the Material World. I love most of George Harrison's solo music. I think it's as solid a catalog as you could get, you know, but that's definitely how I feel about Living in the Material World. But to anyone that points to All Things Must Pass, yeah, you know, 2 albums of great material.
I agree with that part
better
too.
than one great album is 2 great albums, really.
Right.
But it's more commercial, definitely, but still very powerful messages in those songs.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to hear you say that.
Cool.
Tom and Kit, do you have any feelings on other George albums? I mean, All Things Must Pass, Living in the Material World. But I thought, if you had anything else that maybe stands out for you.
Well, Cloud 9 was like the first, album of George's that I was able to buy with my own money. So that's what was held a special place for me. And plus, I was a big MTV junkie too. And, and there he is, finally on MTV. So I got to see him in a couple videos, which was pretty cool. But the album of Cloud9 is just so good. And I think it would have been really good if it wasn't, if someone else produced it as well. I think the songs were that strong.
Stand on their own, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's a little bit of Jeff Lynne influence there, but I think it would have been just as good without Jeff Lynne. But those songs are terrific. And, but I always go back to All Things Must Pass as well. But the song, I love Cloud9. It's great stuff just as well. And the Traveling Wilburys stuff as well. I mean, that was just a great period for me, in my early, really getting into the solo stuff as well as the Beatles. So that was a good time.
That was a great period for George in general. I think I just said about how I felt 68 and 69 and 70 around there.
Seen him do Beatles songs.
88, 89.
Yeah, seen him do Beatles songs not seeing, but listening to him do Beatles songs for that live in Japan as well. I mean, him going back and doing Beatles stuff was really cool.
Absolutely.
I would have never have thought he would have done Piggies in concert.
Yeah, that was cool. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Of course, all Things Must Pass goes without saying. And Cloud9, definitely brings back. I still love that album. It brings back great memories of high school. And I love it too. But I'm going to give a shout out to 33 1/3.
Yes.
I love that album. It just has some great, even a little bit of soul there. Woman, Don't You Cry for Me with that great bass. Of course, you got some humor with this song. Just great stuff there. Pure Smokey. Love the tribute to Smokey Robinson. Cracker Box Palace. You got another, some great humor there. And one of my favorite, talking about ballads, as Ken was mentioning earlier, Learning How to Love You. I mean, beautiful. Another one of his songs that could be romantic or spiritual. And his follow-up, George Harrison, that's great too. I kind of think of them as kind of bookends in a way, because that's wonderful too. I mean, it has Blow Away. I mean, come on, Love. I mean, side one is. I mean, I think side one. I mean, but gosh, Love Comes to Everyone, Not Guilty. Here Comes the Moon, Soft-Hearted Hannah, Blow Away. I mean,
good stuff. Good stuff.
You can't get much better than that.
There's so many great love songs on that album. And that album is very popular these days. I'm finding it. It's one of those albums that's really getting appreciated.
Yes,
more than ever.
And long overdue. Those two. I think those two are now getting more respect.
Trying to remember, like Soft Touch.
Soft Touch
is beautiful.
Yeah, just some wonderful moments on both those albums.
Can you ever get two more beautiful love songs back to back than Dark Sweet Lady and Your Love Is Forever?
Oh, well, that's great too.
They're both gorgeous songs. They really are.
And sung well too.
Yes.
I love his vocals on Dark Sweet Lady. Yeah.
We mentioned Brainwashed earlier. I still feel it's kind of an overlooked album somehow. Because whenever I'm listing my favorite albums, which I just did, all the ones we mentioned would be in my top, and then I go, there's Brainwashed as well that I like, but I forget about it. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because it was a posthumous release that came out later, or when George wasn't here. But let's talk about Brainwashed a little bit. I think we did. Did we do a show on Brainwashed? I think we did.
Yes,
we did.
Yeah. And I think part of it was when it was initially released. I mean, and I didn't appreciate it for a long time because it was released not that long after he passed, and so it did have that for me. It had that kind of hanging over it. So it had this kind of, this sort of sadness hanging over it. But over the years now that 20 years later, as that has, we've gotten more distance from that. It's a good record. It really is. And I think it's gotten better
Right.
you know, with time. I mean, you know, that I think some of those like Any Road and Stuck Inside a Cloud, I think those have become more beloved cuts.
But Stuck Inside a Cloud being the leadoff single for that album, I don't think it necessarily helps everybody's mood either, because it's such a kind of like a little bit of a downer or somber, you know, song. I think, you know, Any Road might have been the better.
I love Any Road. Any Road.
Wonderful song.
I think that would have been the better opening single, you know, Any Road myself. But yeah, exactly, kid. I felt the same way too. I acknowledge that it's a great record. However, you know, it's just one of those things where, you know, you think about it, you know, and then you kind of sad because you know he's not, he's not with us anymore to you know, to promote it or just to, you know, hear him sing songs. You know, we did get to see him do Any Road, right, on the was it the
John Fugelsang?
Yeah. But
that
how
was
many years? How many years? Yeah, how many years prior?
Yeah, 97. I think you're right. Yeah,
that was really early.
That was a treat, since that was a song none of us ever heard before.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful the way George starts to feel. I mean, he's nervous, I think, and not his show, right? Isn't it going to be Ravi that they're really talking about?
Yeah.
And then he starts getting comfortable. A little more comfortable for George.
Yeah, but then Craig's kind of like nagging him on. Hey, play a song, George. Play a song.
I love
George,
how he knows how Fugelsang knows the songs. And even when he starts doing a little bit of a Traveling Wilburys song, Fugelsang starts singing along with it. He knows what it is.
Right.
You know, and stuff like that. Any other thoughts? Brainwashed?
Yeah, I was interesting I was listening when Tom was talking before, like how Cloud 9 was sort of how he came in some ways. And, you know, we really haven't talked about an album that really isn't a George solo album, but the Concert for Bangladesh. And that album for me, it holds a special place because I was around an age. I hate to do this because then, you know, I'm just, you know,
aging yourself.
I'm going to be, you know, heading down to Miami soon, you know. But, you know, I was, when the album was just getting released, it was like the end of 71 into 72. And so at this time in New York, if you lived in New York, it was a great time for what used to be called progressive FM radio. And so I had just gotten my first like cool stereo for Christmas, you know, with the round speakers. I mean, it was kind of a funny little stereo, but it had the FM and the turntable. It had a tape recorder. So I'll never forget this. WOR-FM, one of the progressive radio stations in New York at the time, had the album and they were just playing it. They were just like playing, like, you know, they don't do this anymore on FM radio really. And so I'm recording this, you know, and I mean, I'm however old I was, 12. Okay. I don't even know probably about the concert that had even happened. Okay. And I'm hearing, you know, I'm hearing George and Billy and Leon and Bob Dylan. And I'm just like, what is this? This is just, I'm like, you know, I had never been to a concert at that point. And, you know, I like to pretend I was cool back then. I'm still not cool. I'm still wondering when that's going to happen. But, you know, so I'm hearing this and it obviously it stayed with me. You know, it's like, you just feel like, you know, you're just some 12-year-old kid in the suburbs, but it's like, I'm there. I'm at Madison Square Garden and I'm listening to this. And they're saying, you know, Eric Clapton is there and Badfinger. And it's like, oh my God, this is not happening, you know? So I've had a soft spot for the Concert for Bangladesh, you know, and for a variety of reasons. Obviously it was done for all the right reasons, but you know, it reminds me of that, you know, that Christmas and that time. And, you know, it was a time of, you know, FM underground radio where, you know, you could be exposed to this sort of thing. I mean, now nobody even knows what that is or takes this stuff for granted because they have Spotify and, you know, whatever. I think, Ken, I think you probably have some sense of what I'm talking about. I think, you know?
Although I was more of an AM listener still at that point, but I certainly appreciate what you know, progressive rock was like in the very beginning and how it was much more free form, no tight playlists, and you can get away with playing so many different things and not just the singles, go deep into albums.
Right.
And, radio has changed a lot since then.
Yeah. One of the things I enjoyed was in the mid 80s and even a little bit into the early 90s, the classic rock station I would listen to, they would do this thing called the perfect side, where they would play one side of a whole album. And that was great because not only did you get like a hit or two, you also got those great deep cuts as well.
Gosh,
Something like that, though, it would only be like a weekend kind of special program. It wouldn't be part of your normal program.
No,
in most cases.
It was off times.
Well, we had all these great stations. I mean, WNEW-FM, WOR, PLJ, before they were PLJ, they were WABC-FM, and I mean, the progressive FM radio didn't start in New York. It started in California, in San Francisco with Tom Donahue. But when it did finally hit New York, you had all these stations and, all these cool DJs, and they'd play all this music and interview the artists and tell you all about the concerts. And, Dennis Elstis, who's on WFUV here in New York, in the Bronx, he was part of WNEW-FM in their heyday.
Yeah, he did that great interview with John.
One of the most famous interviews with John Lennon. Yeah.
Very historic. I sometimes look at that as, if not the best, one of the best interviews ever.
Yeah.
With John.
Some of John's best hours there, 2 hours. Whatever it is.
I sometimes think, when it comes to that interview, and I've interviewed Dennis Elstis about it, it just seemed like everything fell into place in that interview, because right around that time, he could plug not only his own album, he could plug Goodnight Vienna. He could talk about George Harrison and Dark Horse. He could talk about George Martin producing America or the Mahavishnu Orchestra or something. It's like all at the same time,
Yeah. That is a great interview.
What year was that?
That was like 75, I think it was, or 74.
74.
Yeah, it's a great. I remember listening to it live, and then later on, I know Dennis. He's a friend of mine, actually, and it is one of the best, and it's used often. I think in one of the recent books in the box sets, I think they refer to that interview. I think in either the Imagine or the Plastic Ono Band box set. I forget which one.
And John couldn't have been funnier.
Yeah,
because he was reading
the
weather, reading commercials
and goofing on T-Rex, on Mark Bolan, and saying you better buy his album because he's all fat with worry.
That wasn't T-Rex. Who was that?
Mark? No, I think it was Mark Bolan. I think it was Mark.
No, it wasn't.
Bolan.
It wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
I'll come up with it.
Okay. All right. Correct.
Not Buzzy Linhart. Was it Buzzy Linhart?
Sworn it was Mark
Buzzy
Bolan.
Linhart. Wait.
Was that
no,
it?
not the.
He was
I
mentioned,
think so.
I know, but I don't know.
Yeah, Buzzy Linhart was mentioned. I'll have to think of it.
Okay, I
He
always
makes a
thought it
couple
was
of
Mark
Bowie
Bolan.
jokes. He makes a joke about Bowie being able to get into the ladies' night or something.
Right. So quick-witted.
Reading the commercial for the joint in the woods.
Yeah.
That's great. That's funny.
Nothing
too.
like the joint in the woods. He says losing his green card possibilities with one blow.
Yep.
Oh boy.
And George had a pretty good sense of humor too.
Yes, he did.
Into that, right?
Nicely done, sir.
We did a show on that too, George.
Yeah,
Yes,
we sure did.
Yeah, sense of humor. And doesn't he say something even talking about Bangladesh, which struck me as a little humorous in retrospect, when they're talking about maybe doing some kind of charity for the Beatles or something. And George says, "Well, doesn't charity begin at home?"
Home, right?
Yes, that's right.
Right.
So that was kind of interesting, given Bangladesh. But he was asked by a friend,
Yes.
To do that. So, how about we discuss a little bit of George's guitar playing, and maybe some favorite moments. Like, I know for me, I love Back Off Boogaloo. I love George's work on that.
Yeah.
Seems to me like he was really great when he had the time to really work it out. I think that's arguably not too good on the fly, but he had to really have the time going back to the Get Back stuff. I don't know if he had the time. They were really rushed to get those songs done.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Well, I mean, the
go ahead,
slide guitar. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just
It's
going to
going to
say
happen.
that.
It's okay.
All right, just the slide guitar sound, became such a trademark for him, and just really perfected it. And in fact, earlier today, when Tom did a live chat to talk about tonight's show, we were talking about Cheer Down.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Great guitar work on that. One of my favorite George songs that I discovered later, later after it was released. And one of those, why the heck wasn't this a bigger hit? But yeah, just some incredible guitar on that one. And I just love that sound, that as I said, that sort of slide sound that became such a trademark of his later, of course, later solo work. That just, it's just the kind of sound that, as soon as you hear it,
Yeah.
like, that's George Harrison.
That's George.
Yeah.
Right. I love the song Day After Day is great, but then when you find out that it's, George doing, the slide guitar or whatever on that song, I think, I think is an excellent effort from him. I love the guitar work on the song Cloud Nine as well. Or go ahead, Ken.
Yes.
Joey Molland has
Was
said
that Joey
to me that. No, Joey Molland said that was Pete Ham and George.
Okay, so it's both of them. Okay,
so
all right,
yeah.
But great stuff nonetheless. I love the guitar work on the song Cloud Nine. I love how he sings about the guitar riff on this song, and then he goes into the solo. I really dig that. But yeah,
this is love.
This is love.
Mm-hmm.
But we talked about this too before. I mean, I really would have missed the fact that I wish he would have rocked out a little bit more in his solo career. I think a lot, those rockers that we got from them during the Beatles, I think his solo career might have been lacking a little bit in. I wish there was more Devil Radio style songs.
The first one that came to mind was Devil
Radio.
Yeah,
good point.
Whether or not he had someone else do a lead guitar, like Clapton did a bunch of lead on, on All Things Must Pass. I mean, it doesn't matter. I just would have liked a little bit more up-tempo songs from George. Not that there wasn't a bunch, because there is. I mean, Faster is a good, up-tempo song, but yeah, I think that I would have liked to have seen a little bit more.
I think one of the most important contributions that George made as far as his guitar playing is in the sort of mid-60s period when he's playing his Rickenbacker. And I mean, essentially launching the sound of Roger McGuinn and the Byrds. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's so significant to their evolution. And I mean, they, of course, people, now there's so many people don't even know who the Byrds are. But at the time, they really, when they hit the scene, they were huge. And as far as America is concerned, people were like, kind of like, here's our Beatles, sort of. Now David Crosby has always said, don't ever compare the Byrds to the Beatles, because we never were ever in their league. And I think that's David just being modest. It's true, but he's being modest. I think that, look, it's obvious the Byrds took the beat and the jangle of the Beatles and the poetry of Dylan and put it together. And that sounds easy to do, but I mean, they did it. And the only other group to me that ever came close was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. I think REM, as far as the music, Pete Buck's guitar, there's a little bit of that. I had interviewed REM and Pete said a little bit, and Michael Stipe said, no, I didn't even know who the Byrds were when we formed. I don't necessarily believe that, but what George did in terms of that sound and how it influenced the Byrds, I'm a huge fan of the Byrds. I mean, they had great songs, and those harmonies, they're just extraordinary harmonies, especially when Gene Clark was in the group, early on. So that mid-60s, when George found the Rickenbacker, and that was actually John who kind of turned George onto it, because I think it was Rickenbacker came to the Beatles with one of these prototype 12 strings, and George was sick or something, I believe. And so John saw it and said, "Oh, George is going to love this." And I believe this is the story, and said to him, "Here, you should check this out." And I mean, I just love to hear, that, especially the Help period, obviously, with George, with the 12 string, with the Rickenbacker. That sound is just, I mean, it's just, I love it. I can never get enough of it, and I can never get enough of what the Byrds did with it.
Nice.
I think when it comes to guitar playing, a couple things with George. Certainly during the Beatle years, he was so skillful at coming up with guitar solos that were short and memorable. I mean, all you got to do is like if someone says to me, "Don't bother me," I can hear the guitar solo, I can hum it, and that is in and of itself a talent. There are certain guitar solos that he does that are very overlooked. I think his guitar playing for what he brought to Till There Was You was very unique for a pop band at the time. I hate to admit this because there's some confusion with Hey Bulldog. I do believe that's George on lead. I've heard some people say it might be John, but I love the lead guitar part in Hey Bulldog. It's very stinging.
Right.
And it's more than just the lead guitar part. He became a really great acoustic guitar player. I mean, Here Comes the Sun, his playing is just with such precision, with all these different time signatures, and it's so clean, the guitar sound, what he brought to that. And you can talk a lot about his slide guitar work, because there is a sound that is distinctively George, and there are other guitar players who will play a slide guitar part and it'll sound like George, but you give the credit to George because it's really his sound. And for years I've been bringing up Cheer Down on my show, because not only is it great slide guitar work, he goes on for like 2 minutes of playing, and he never plays for that long doing a solo. But there's all kinds of great slide guitar. I always think of The Lord Loves the One, especially the way the song ends with a lot of slide guitar parts. Really beautiful guitar playing there. Trading the lead guitar parts on That's What It Takes, I love a lot. Nice. But there's a sound that is distinctively George. And when you've got a style that's your own, that makes you, even more of an artist, that stands out. And you could say all four Beatles have their own individual styles, which is true. They were influenced by so many artists, but they developed their own styles. And, there's nobody that writes songs like George does, and nobody play guitar like George does, especially on slide.
Here.
I think we got some comments. I noticed some. So I think it was Saul Perez said, of course, pointing out that "How Do You Sleep" wouldn't have been nearly as stinging and biting without George's, nasty guitar on there, and that's true. That's a good one. And I Love Her, of course. Don't forget "And I Love Her." The touch. Paul even acknowledges that, right? These days.
The opening lick of "Oh My Love," it's beautiful.
Yes.
Now, Taxman isn't George playing, right?
That's Paul doing the lead.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is so strange, I mean, it's great. I mean, I love it, but it is strange. Here's this song that, one of George's best, most commercial rockers opening an album, which is, unprecedented for George. And it's not him playing that, that great lead. It's when you finally learn that, it's like, what? Surprising. Really? You're kidding? Okay. All right. That's cool.
It's a fun part to study with the Beatles, who played what, because they often traded, their parts, their instrumental parts around. Paul did a
just-
lot of lead guitar work. So
Yeah.
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 I was just thinking, just reading some of the comments and some of the guitar parts we've just talked about. That's the thing. George was such a versatile guitarist too, and he just got more versatile as he developed, in his skill. I mean, he could play everything from, like you mentioned, Ken, you mentioned something. I mean, almost I don't know, kind of a folky style. I was thinking like even something like Honey Don't. I mean, that's like country, he could do that. And of course, rockabilly, exactly. He could do, we've talked about his slide work, or he could do a nasty solo like How Do You Sleep? We just talked about that. I mean, he could really just do all different kinds of
and his
styles.
acoustic guitar playing was extraordinary as well. I mean, I could listen to him play acoustic guitar all day as well.
Exactly. I mean, he could. Yeah. I mean, his like the White Album demos, the
Easter demos.
All Things Must Pass. The Easter demos, right?
Saturday Night Live with George.
Paul Simon.
Paul Simon. Yeah.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
I mean, that was incredible. So he just had just a really impressive versatility as a guitarist, and he just got better as he got older.
So George's slide. So this is something I don't think I really know. Who is his sort of influence? I mean, I think we know who some of the earlier influences are on his guitar playing, but as far as when that blues slide style that sort of comes later, like where does that come? Is there a specific influence, or are there several guitar players? Or I mean, does that come at all from Eric Clapton, from his friendship with Eric Clapton in any way?
that part I don't
Where
know.
does it start? Too?
That's a good
what I was-
question.
Yeah,
Didn't it
I mean,
start-
it just I don't
think-
really remember. I can't really think off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
it just occurs to me that I don't, because I love that too. And it doesn't have to be on a George Harrison song either for you to
Right.
like it, as has been said here tonight, but
Yeah.
but we don't know this. Okay.
No,
Can you make a guess?
I
Can we make a
think-
guess?
I'm not totally positive, but I seem to recall Delaney Bramlett giving himself credit when they were on tour, teaching him the very beginnings of slide. But then,
Really?
then George developed his own style altogether
Okay.
from that.
Yeah.
All right. See,
But
and
that
that's
makes
really
sense.
interesting because if you listen to Eric Clapton's first solo album, and obviously he did a lot of music, before that. I mean, it took Eric Clapton a long time to make a solo album. He was in the Yardbirds, he was in the Blues Breakers, he was in Cream. I mean, he did many things before he ever made a solo album. And most people have said that solo album is very influenced by Delaney. That's where he basically got his vocal style. Now, obviously, he had sung songs prior to that,
Yeah.
but of course, then he would develop more of his own style. So that's really interesting to hear that Delaney had such an influence on both Eric and George. That's interesting.
That's actually discussed in Ken and Jason's book.
Okay,
I
I'm
just
not
remember
surprised.
that. So
Okay.
now I remember. Yeah, just remember that.
Okay.
That yes, Delaney and Bonnie had a tremendous influence on both Clapton and George.
Okay,
So
good stuff.
so that makes sense. Yeah.
And they did those big box set reissues that look like the cases that touring musicians have. They have all the nights of the shows in London where Eric and George play with Delaney and Bonnie. And some of it is amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
like to hear where they really kind of stretch out. I mean, George tends to kind of hang back a little bit, and even Clapton sort of kind of tends to hang back. I mean, I think that as British musicians, they kind of look at the Americans, especially playing blues, as like, well, they're the masters. They're the originators.
Right.
We're the carpetbaggers, which is hysterical to think about.
Yeah.
But there is that great respect. All joking aside.
For sure.
So wouldn't the solo then and Come Together be kind of like the first time we hear like a slide guitarist?
I was wondering what would be the first. That's interesting to consider. I think that's slidey.
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
it kind of is. Yeah, it's a little slidey.
Slidey.
To use a term.
Slide guitar. ish.
Mighty.
Nothing on the White Album. There's really nothing on the White Album that where he plays that sort of thing, or
I don't
That's what I can
recall.
I'm
think
trying
of.
to think of the whole White Album in my head.
Yeah, I know.
right.
like,
That's a
trying to
lot of
remember the
songs.
White
It's
Album.
22
Yeah.
songs.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't recall. I mean, just off the top of my head, anything slidey.
Okay.
Yeah, off the top of my head.
Well,
Yeah.
what's the lap? What's the lap
trying
guitar
to-
that John uses for You Blue? I mean, is that
That's a Hawaiian lap steel.
lap steel?
guitar.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
that's what he's doing. He's kind of
Right.
he's doing more of sort of the kind of Hawaiian slack key thing almost, as opposed
And
to
John's pretty proud of himself with that too.
it's
Yes.
it's great.
Mm.
It's really
Right.
great. You
He's
know, I
like
mean,
saying, "Oh,
John
really?
is
What
probably
What does
the
he say in the
least,
movie? I'm
you
really
know,
at my peak now."
he's kind of the least accomplished, really, almost instrumentalist in the group, really, if you think about it, you know, in some ways. And some people are hearing that and are throwing tomatoes at the screen right now. But I mean, it is true in a lot of ways that the other three are more accomplished as instrumentalists, certainly, you know.
How
I
did it
don't know.
come to be? I still don't think I know how John wound up doing the guitar solo in Get Back. Does anybody know how that came
Don't know.
to?
I do
be.
not know. Steve, there's a comment for you from Mark Zetkov, who says, Steve, one of my all-time favorite Clapton solos is on I Don't Want to Discuss It from the Delaney and Bonnie On Tour with Eric Clapton album and the
Right.
box set.
Right. Excellent.
Mhm.
You know, that's that album. I mean, it stood as just a single album for years until a few years ago when they put this massive, I don't know how many CDs that box set is. It's a lot. It's at least 4 or 5 or more. And it's just the album that it's just so good. It's just blistering blues rock. I mean, Delaney and Bonnie and Friends are a band that, you know, most people don't even know or forgotten. They had sort of a hit with Only You and You Know and I Know, which I think Dave Mason actually wrote. And, you know, again, that period of like 70, 71, where you have all these different players and everybody's kind of playing together and everything. But yeah, that's some good stuff.
They had a hit record called Never Ending Song of Love.
Okay.
Remember that? I think that went top 20.
Really? Okay.
Country.
I don't remember that one.
don't
All
remember
right. Okay.
Steve, I wanted to touch on something that you made me think of when you said that George doesn't really let himself go, kind of. You know, it's good to just like let yourself go once in a while. Live it up, you know.
And it's funny too,
Honeymooners.
because I was
I know.
watching an interview with John Oates of Hall & Oates fame, and he was talking. I did not know that those two were friends, and that was just a funny thing that I was just watching that interview, and he would talk about how in '77, I think it was, that they were recording an album, and George invited Hall & Oates over to watch the Ruddles show, and while they were there, Hall & Oates asked him, hey, why don't you come on and record on our upcoming album? And George was like, well, yeah. So he gets there and he goes, well, I just want to be part of the band. I'll just sit here, strum the guitar. I mean, I don't want any of the focus on me. And you know, and you hear that quite a bit too, or you see that quite a bit with George as well. I mean, he doesn't want to take the focus away from you know, many people that he's working with a lot of times. And I just think that's quite a, you know, a egotistical thing about George that I love.
Well, one of the things
Do you-
we were talking about Cheer Down before, and there's footage of him doing it live in Japan in 1991. And as much as I love getting to see George doing it, he still seems very like tight and careful the way he's doing it. But I wanted to lead up to one of the best times I think George ever let himself go was the Carl Perkins and Friends special.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh man, when he was doing like Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby and stuff like that. Oh, that was such a great moment. He's having so much fun with his idol Carl Perkins, and I don't think he wants that night to end. George, the way it's going.
Big moment was when they did Your True Love. And they're
Your True
sharing lead vocals with Carl Perkins, George Harrison, and Dave Edmunds. What a kick-A version of that song.
Yeah.
But one
Kick-A,
thing, because
yeah.
I wanted to say, because of what Tom brought up, if you want to know, there was one Hall & Oates album that George appeared on called Along the Red Ledge.
That's
right.
it right there.
And
Yeah.
Oh.
George
Like
played on a song
78,
called The
I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
The Last Time is a song
Right.
that George is on. So if you want to go to YouTube and hear it,
Yep.
you can actually tell George is on it, but he's not mixed hot enough, but you can tell it's George's guitar.
I have that album on vinyl.
Yeah.
I remember when it came out and that George was on it. I don't know why, but it's true.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
I got to go
I've
look
played
this
it.
up. I missed this.
Yep.
Okay.
I've played it on my radio show several times. So.
Wow. I haven't heard this. My gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow. And I would have loved to have been on a fly on the wall, listening to George and Hall Notes, watching
the
and
Ruddles
discussing it. I mean,
Right.
good God.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
How cool would that be?
Yep.
So, any other questions? Do we have any comments or anybody else? If anybody here has any George,
Well,
things
I
they want to
mean,
bring up.
yeah, I would just like to say, I mean, not only is it the music that is, really memorable, obviously, I mean, but it's the friendships that he's had over the years and the way they continue to talk about him after all these years since he's been gone, and just the love they express that they have for George is really amazing when you go back and listen to a lot of these people talk. And whether or not it's music related or racing related or gardening related, it's just he just had so many. We talked about the concert for George, and all those people up there. I think Ken said I'm going to have been associated with him one way or the other, throughout the years. And just to see stuff like people talk about him on the Living Material World, and or people talking about him, or the people you see, the concert for George or whatever. I mean, whenever you see people talking about him, it's just love that they have from him. I never heard anybody say a bad word about George.
Even Jackie Stewart.
Jackie Stewart.
He was welling up.
Fan. Yeah, it's just amazing to see the way that everybody that has crossed paths with George and the way they talk about him is really amazing, and we could only be that lucky.
Yeah. When I interviewed Klaus Vormann, I got a sense of like their friendship and how they related to each other. Right. And you could see how they would be close because, anybody if you've ever met Klaus or talked to him or seen him interviewed, there's a calm about him, there's a centeredness, and he's not impressed with, celebrity or any of the fame or any of this stuff. And there's just this calm, and you're really drawn to it. I think, people say if you want to get somebody's attention, whisper. And I think that you get that sense, like I just loved talking to Klaus. I just felt like you forget, like it's Klaus Vormann, and you forget his relationship with the Beatles. You're just connecting with this person, and I think there's just this calm. There's just this something about George. And I think like anybody that would take time to get to know, I think once you get to know them, it's a little deeper. I think sometimes people are very much on the surface, where I think George wasn't. I think, what do they say? Still waters run deep, and I think that it comes through. And that's a lot of why I said Why All Things Must Pass is my favorite album, because there's so much there lyrically alone that what I always say about that album, it's not an album, it's a monument. It really is. It's a towering sort of thing. It must have been difficult, I think, in some ways for him to do it, because it was really his first solo album, and there was so much of it. And how is the public going to react to it? So it must have been a really intense experience for him to make that record,
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I think first of all, I agree with you. I mean, it's not my number one favorite album of all time, but it's like top 10 for sure. Top 10 because I totally understand what you're saying, Steve. I mean, the messages on that album are just so profound. I mean, when you really, as time went on, and it is an album that kind of, grows on you over time. And as you get older, it even just becomes even deeper in meaning, and to think how
Yes.
young he was
Oh, yeah.
when he
I
wrote
know.
that stuff.
That is amazing
Unbelievable.
to think about that. Yeah, I know.
I mean, what a thinker, what a
to
philosopher.
be that young. Yeah, I'd heard BB King was he worked with U2 around the Rattle and Hum. And
Yes.
Rattle and Hum. Yes.
I remember
his
that.
observation was, he said to Bono, "You're so young. Like, where does this heaviness come from? Like, where, because BB King told me this. I interviewed him, and he talked about it, and it was like, you wonder, like, that people that young have such wisdom. I think people who grew up at that time in England, the war came to them. I mean, they literally lived in a place that was bombed. And however hard we ever have it here in America, other than 9/11, we've never seen anything like that. Right. So I think to come out of that, I think you don't take life for granted. You really have an appreciation that stays with you. And I think that was part of it too. England is a small country in a lot of ways. London is the only really big city. It's a little village, England. And I think in Liverpool is even a littler village. Yeah. And so there's a tightness, there's a real community. I mean, you read any of these biographies of the Beatles' time in Liverpool. I mean, family is so, central, and community, and you're local, and, all of that sort of thing. So you can see where they come from. It's very much still where they came from. Their upbringing is part of it,
Absolutely. And I think another part of his legacy too is, he really challenged us as listeners. I mean, he, both in subject, he challenged us to think deeper, but also in terms of culture. I mean, he introduced us largely to Indian music, and I was not familiar with it at all until I started listening to the Beatles, and then listened to some of his solo music, and it's it was something that in the West, I mean, it's there are different kind of tempos, different kinds of things that we're just not used to. And he really, introduced it to us in ways, different ways. I mean, kind of an East meets West kind of fusion. And, really, really, I think opened the doors for world music.
The Inner Light is a great example, a song that's kind of obscure, very much an obscure Beatles song.
Right. But that, and of course, Within You, Without You, Love You Too, which is one of my favorites. I
think that's a very underrated Beatles song, Love You Too. That's just my opinion.
Yep, I agree. And so, I mean, I think that's another part of his legacy too, is the, world music and fusion of all different cultures that, we're still experiencing today.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. And as I've said, it's one thing to take a sitar and add it to a folk song like Norwegian Wood. It's another thing altogether to create an entire Indian piece from scratch, like Love You Too. And like we were just saying, imagine how young he was. So Revolver's 1966, George would have been 23 writing Love You Too. He was 23 or 24 writing Within You, Without You. And it isn't just the music itself and the different instrumentation, it's the Eastern philosophy that he brought along with it. One of the things that's so fascinating about the Beatles is how they're four very different people in their own way, and I wouldn't want it any other way. But somebody like Paul McCartney, who I think is always concerned about record sales and commercial success, George Harrison, I think, cared somewhat, especially. I believe that he felt fulfilled just from the Beatle years and that initial success he had with All Things Must Pass, and the Concert for Bangladesh. Living in the Material World was a #1 album. But I think overall, he cared more about just putting out music that was meaningful and pleasing to him. And if it was successful, fine. If it wasn't, that's okay too. And just having that kind of an attitude is something that I think is influential. there's lots of artists out there that don't care as much about commercial success. They care more about the message in their music and what they're saying. And I think George became more of that. He always was that, even in the Beatles. But I love that contrast within the Beatles with all four of them, who are all different in their own way. But yeah, and like you said, Kit, world music, it really, what George contributed by bringing Indian music was so monumental.
Yeah.
And there are people who I think were influenced not just by the music, but with what he was saying in his lyrics and with Eastern philosophy.
That's one of his biggest contributions. I mean, maybe the biggest in a lot to music in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
I marvel at
so
the
many
fact
people
that,
meditate these days and are into
Yeah.
yoga and all. It's such a common thing now.
Mhm.
You
Got
think
a lot
about
of
the
work to
fact that-
do, try to get a message through.
the four Beatles were four of the most popular people on the planet at the time. And for George to say words like, and to know you're really only very small,
Mm.
and life flows on within you and without you, that you're really just one out of millions of people. You're not
Yeah.
any more important than anybody else. And he had the guts to say this at such a young age. To grasp that whole idea is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
quite a song. Considering that also it was a track that I dare say a lot of people skipped back in
Yeah.
the day. I did as a young person.
Mm.
I didn't really care for it. I love it now, and it
Yeah.
means a lot to me.
Right.
Reasons for like what you just said.
Absolutely.
So much of what we don't have these days in popular music is groups. I mean, we just don't see rock groups. I mean, it's the charts are dominated, mostly by solo artists, by singers. I mean, Kings of Leon to me are maybe the last sort of, pop rock group who, obviously had some substance, whether you like them or not, personally. I mean, there's definitely something there, but I think what made so much of the music of the 60s, even into the 70s, so great is you have all of these amazing people in one group: the Beatles, the Stones, the Who, the Kinks, Pink Floyd, the Yardbirds, the Small Faces. I mean, I could just keep going on here, and in the 70s too, Fleetwood Mac, Steely Dan, the Eagles. I mean, I'm just randomly sort of picking names here, but when you've got 2 or 3 or 4 people who can sing and write songs and then collaborate together, or groups that just create such unique sounds like Roxy Music or Traffic. It's just, there's no one else sounds like that. Where now, and maybe it sounds like, oh yeah, you're an old man or whatever. It's just, it just show me some groups, show me where you have people collaborating and creating something organically.
Yeah. Plus, you get so many songs that have multiple writers on these songs. I mean, there's some songs, 5, 6 writers on one song. Why?
Right, not for the right reasons.
Right.
Either.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Not for the right reason.
Right. It's just to create a product to sell for that artist, and that artist is not even an artist anymore. They're a brand now. And it's like, I mean, maybe we shouldn't go down this road, because it's just
a whole show on
this has
this.
been such a positive. I think this has been so positive,
Don't get me started.
Don't get me started. That's one of my favorite sayings. So, but I mean, I think that's why people still love them today, the Beatles, so much, because it's just, there was this group of these 4 guys, and somehow they got together in this place, and we're still here. We are. I mean, you talked about at the top of the show, Ken, talking about, the Let It Be reissue entering the charts in the top 10. I mean, there won't be anybody who's making music today who will be still making, still resonate 50 years from now, let alone 40 or 30 or 20 or probably even 10.
Right.
Well, Nobody knows that for sure.
They always say that.
Yes.
That's
Because that's
You-
true. Nobody
You can
has
tell
a
just
crystal
by
ball.
looking at 1980 or 1978
No,
or
you
whatever.
can't.
You know,
The fact that
I don't believe that.
90.
what they did in that 8
You sound like Ringo.
years. Yeah, they did what they did in that 8 years, and now sometimes it takes a band or an artist to do
What
two
band?
albums, two
But that's
albums.
the
It
thing,
was-
though. I don't
guys,
see. I don't
No.
see. I don't see groups. I don't see bands. I'm
It
talking
was
about
a
the
miracle.
charts.
Yeah.
It was
charts
a, a
is
lot of
what
people
I'm
don't
talking
believe it.
about.
Right.
I know it was a miracle. It was
Well, what
orchestrated.
was
Okay,
it? It's been
I'm not
35. So what it
denying that.
was? It was what 5 years since Adele's last record. I mean,
Yeah,
you
about
know,
Yeah, I like her
Beatles
a
had-
lot. I think
yeah,
she's
me too.
great. I like her
Yeah.
I
a
like
lot.
Adele.
but
Yeah.
again, the Beatles had what 7 albums out in 5
Yeah.
years.
It's amazing.
Those were
Amazing.
different times also
Yeah.
when their contracts demanded that you put
Yeah,
out 2
true.
albums a year.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep, it
but
was a different time.
to their strength, and I've been saying this for a long time, the Beatles were a group with 4 vocalists,
Mm-hmm.
and even though Ringo only wrote 2 songs, really,
I was going to say,
in
can you
the group,
imagine if
but
he was
there's
actually a
4
writer?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, like, yeah. Wow.
but it adds so much when
Yeah.
you've got 3 truly great songwriters in your group
Mm.
and 4 different vocalists. It adds so much. There's less than 1% of the bands of all time have, everyone in the group singing lead vocals.
Mm.
I'm very happy that at least once in a while the Beatles let Ringo sing a lead vocal,
Yeah.
usually one on an album. But, how many can you think of outside of,
Right.
The
the
Eagles.
Monkees
I
or
think the
Badfinger,
Eagles,
actually?
Yeah.
The Eagles, yeah.
Yeah.
But they're very
the
few.
Birds.
And then the
Yeah.
Beatles, each of them on their own, had
And
successful
then each-
solo careers.
Thank you. I mean, how many bands are able to say like the Rolling Stones? I mean, nobody cares about those Mick Jagger and Keith Richard albums.
Wait.
Nobody.
I like some of it.
Nobody.
I like some
Uh-oh.
of it.
Okay, for the bulk of the fans, I mean, all you gotta do is just
Nobody
look at the
cares.
chart. All you gotta do is just look at the success of those solo albums. They didn't really do,
Yeah.
have a success of the Stones.
Right.
While some of the, while the Beatles as solo artists were almost able to equal some of the success that the Beatles had.
And
You
Paul's
know,
still making
Paul
amazing
still,
Sure
solo
does.
albums. I mean, with his
Great
last
albums.
album, that's a great album.
Yep.
I love it.
Absolutely.
It's
Alright.
incredible to think that even someone like Ringo, who you would expect to have the least amount of success,
right.
still managed to have 7 top 10 singles and 2 #1 singles in the
Right.
US and 2 top 10 albums.
Yeah.
And overall, he had the least amount like we expected, but that's pretty darn good. That's a career for anybody else.
Yeah.
It sure
Yeah.
is.
And he came out very strong, right out of the,
Right
Right out of the gate. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool.
So, where are we at now?
Well,
All right. I think
Any comments? I don't know if you're checking the comments. I put my phone down. I had it up open for a while, but
let's see. Just seeing if there's
put you on the spot.
there's been a ton of comments here. Let's see. Ollie Perry mentions Gone Troppo is a favorite, and we did an episode on Gone Troppo, and part of our Another Listen series. I said it's Gone Troppo is very spiritual to him. And let's see. Also mentions loved his silly songs, and yep. Certainly can't argue there. Mark Zekov says, yeah, George was an old soul in a young man's body. Hear, hear. That's for sure. I mean, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's just, there's so much to say about John Tobacco mentioned George doing the pirate song on the Rutland Weekend TV show.
Rutland Weekend TV, all right.
George Harrison sings.
Well, first time I saw that, I sure got fooled.
Yeah.
Yep, that was hilarious.
Yep.
Oh my
I
gosh!
thought he was going to do my Sweet Lord or something.
But many comments here. Thank you for sharing all of your memories and all that. We will go through. We do read your comments, and we thank you for sharing your favorite songs and memories. A lot of Delaney and Bonnie discussion in the comments too. So
Love Delaney and Bonnie. Love him.
Yep.
Love
A
him.
lot of comments.
Delaney
there.
left us quite a while ago, but I
Yes.
believe that Bonnie is still around. I believe.
Yes, she
I
is.
think you're, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
So,
Hey,
any
could I add one
last-minute
last thing?
thoughts? Sure.
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
wanted to. We haven't mentioned George playing the ukulele.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and he was
How
a
could we
big fan
forget?
of George Formby. And of
Yes.
course, we all know Paul has done a wonderful
Yeah.
tribute for many years now with something playing it with the ukulele. And I do believe to some degree, it's helped to boost the popularity of that instrument. I know when I spoke to Greg Hawkes of the Cars, who put out a CD in which he plays the ukulele of all Beatles songs, he believes that George has been an influence. And there are now uke fests going on
Wow.
Yes.
in the country. So, I'm not saying he single-handedly did it, but I think he helped to make the ukulele a popular instrument. And also there's a ukulele player called Jake Shimabukuro, who is a really great ukulele player, who became really well known because he performed While My Guitar Gently Weeps in Central Park, and a friend of his recorded it on videotape and posted it on YouTube, and then he got like 1 million hits, and he got a record contract out of it.
Wow.
So, I think that by George Harrison embracing the ukulele, it's led to more of a popularity of that instrument. Not him
Yeah, I think
alone, but
yeah.
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 I think it was like Tom Petty said something like he always had a truck full that
Yep.
he always opened the trunk
Yes.
and he would
I've read
distribute
Sure,
that.
you
Yeah.
have
Yep.
one.
Yep.
ukuleles.
Yep. Absolutely. Very
Cool.
good.
Excellent.
I'm all out of ideas. So,
All right.
kid, if you want to
Alright.
tell people where to find us, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. Well, you can find us. Well, first of all, thank you all for joining us tonight. And if you want to find out more about us, you can find us on Facebook, Talk More Talk, a Solo Beatles videocast. You can, of course, subscribe right here to our YouTube channel. We're so glad we can finally broadcast to YouTube live and have fixed our technical issues. So of course, subscribe right here to this channel and ring the bell to be notified of new episodes. You can find us on virtually any podcasting platform you can think of. This episode will be up probably by tomorrow or Wednesday. You can also email us if you have any ideas for future topics, any feedback. You can email us at talkmoresolotalk@gmail.com, and you can find us on Twitter at talkmoretalk1, the number 1, and you can find us on the web at talkmoretalk.com. We're everywhere.
Thanks to you, kids.
Yeah.
That's right.
And thanks so much, Steve Matteo, for joining us here.
Yes,
Thank you.
indeed.
This
Thank you
was
so
great.
much.
It was fun. I really appreciate it.
Oh,
Where can people find you, Steve?
I mean, I'm on Facebook, Instagram mostly. I don't have a website as yet. I'm still a little hesitant to do that. But there's the book. It's on Amazon. I know I've seen it in all. It's stocked in all the Barnes and Nobles in the area.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I've seen
It's
it
still in
a
print.
lot.
As John Lennon said, it's the usual rubbish, but it doesn't cost much. But
that's the bargain we're going to strike up.
Yeah, exactly. So pick it up. It is a helpful companion for the Get Back series for people who are just kind of getting into this. It's kind of a quick, short read. It's not the first volume of Mark Lewison's biography, the British version, the 1,600-page version, which I did read, by the way. I recommend reading it.
Good for you.
It was,
I don't have the big one.
heaven. It's just Mark needs to be knighted for what he did with that book. I loved it. It didn't feel like 1,600 pages. I read it and I just loved it.
I agree. It was an amazing read.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. So check it out.
So
thank you.
Let's go around and say what we're doing. I'm doing nothing right now. I'm taking a break lately. I haven't been making videos in a few days. Although there's a whole bunch of stuff that I've done about Get Back, and Let It Be, Get Back. If you want to check that out on the Me Mr. Mayo YouTube channel. So yeah, that's me, a kid. How about you?
Okay, well, tomorrow I am going to be on the Tuesday Night Record Club out of Monmouth University with Ken Womack, and kind of good timing. We are going to talk about Band on the Run. We are going to, which is celebrating its 48th anniversary. Am I
That's
correct?
right.
Yep. And
perfect album side, number one.
Yes,
Side one, perfect album side.
There you go, Joe. Very true.
Side two also.
Yeah, well, it's just a darn good album. Any way you look at it. So we are going to be doing that on Zoom, December 7th at 7:30 Eastern, and it's free to attend. You can register, and I actually the link to register is up on our Talk More Talk Facebook page. So you can just go over there and register. My Beatles Christmas gift guide will be up very soon at Something Else Reviews. And I will be doing an episode of my monthly show very soon. I didn't do one last month because it would have been around Get Back, and well, we were all kind of busy. So decided I'd skip it and am doing one this month. So just follow me on Facebook, and I will let you know when I'm going to do my last show of 2021. So so that's about it for me.
Wow, 2021 is almost over. 2022 is going to start. The year of Soylent Green, by the way. I'm a science fiction fan. Soylent Green took place in the future year.
Wow.
Of 2022.
Really? Oh my
God,
that's
right
scary.
on track for it.
Scary.
And on that note, Tom, how about you?
Well, like you guys, like Kit and Joe said, we've done a lot of Get Back stuff, so much so that we've actually taken a nice little break, which was good because we got to catch up on some sleep because, my partner and I, Andy, we watched Get Back as it was airing on real time. So he was at 3 a.m. and I was at 1 a.m. here in Arizona. And I think, Ken, you tried to do that too, didn't you? The first.
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
I struggled the first time.
Yeah. So that was fine, and we went live, and that's all there on our YouTube channel, Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast. So you can check that out there. Please subscribe. We're inching closer to the 900 subscribers mark. So thank you to everybody out there that has been listening, and all the new subscribers that have been coming in. We really appreciate you guys taking the time. For this month, we've got 3 more shows coming this month. We're going to record a 50th anniversary of Wildlife show tomorrow night with our friend and YouTuber Norman Masloff, who goes by Mazzy. He's got a great channel on YouTube, so check that out. We're going to do part 3 of our Best Friend series with our good buddy Anthony Rotuno over at the Glass Onion on John Lennon podcast, and then we're going to end out the year with our year in review show, and we'll go back and talk about McCartney's year and all the releases that I happily purchased throughout the year, and all of them, as a matter of fact. I mean, it was a pretty expensive year. I don't know if it was expensive as some years. Maybe 18 was, I think, it was a pretty expensive year, but this was right up there with it. So, but a great time, a lot of great releases. So again, please check us out on our YouTube channel, Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast, and we're everywhere else too, thanks to Andy and getting us all on those audio platforms as well. So that's it.
All right. And how about you, Kenneth Michaels?
Kenneth. Okay.
That's what it says.
Joseph.
Yeah.
Well, on my other podcast, Things We Said Today, by the way, I just wanted to say thanks to everybody who watched the interview that we did with Peter Jackson. I can't believe it. We got 25,000 views for that.
That's great.
Thanks
Yeah.
all of you.
Well deserved.
I can't believe it. New subscribers to the podcast, new subscribers to my YouTube channel.
Yep.
It's all been going up. And we have Peter Jackson to thank for that, and to all you guys for watching. We had so much fun with Peter, and like I said, I think after almost 4 hours, there were no questions left. But now, having watched Get Back, there are
Right.
questions I want to
Right.
ask him. Anyway, but thanks to all of you and for all the nice comments on YouTube that we've gotten for that interview. And we just did a show where we reviewed Get Back. And then kind of like us, our next show, which is next week, we'll do a tribute to George Harrison as well. Also on my YouTube channel, my most recent interview was with Ken Womack and Jason Krupa, talking about the book, All Things Must Pass Away. This coming week, I'll be interviewing Bruce Spicer and Al Sussman for Bruce's new book, which is all about the period after Sgt. Pepper, the Our World broadcast, Magical Mystery Tour, the film, the album, the Yellow Submarine album and film, Lady Madonna single, everything but the White Album. It's like that whole period right there through the beginning of 1969. So I'll be interviewing them, and that'll be on my YouTube channel, which is Ken Michaels Radio. Also
Ken,
on my
Ken,
website.
real quick, Ken, Mark says you need to schedule that follow-up interview with Peter Jackson pronto.
Okay, I'll make sure to make those demands to Peter. He's got nothing better to do, you know.
No, the pronto was my comment, but
okay. I'll get right on that, Mark. Thank you. I mean, how much more can you ask of the guy anyway?
Right.
But on my website, I'll have a very big special contest coming soon concerning Yellow Submarine. If I can find the book, here it is.
I think I know what book you're talking about.
It's all in the mind.
Yes.
Yes, excellent.
I'll be giving away a copy of that book and a lot of.
Is that part 2?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll be giving this away along with Yellow Submarine memorabilia in one big package, and that'll be kind of like something. Probably start the middle of December, leading into Christmas, and just visit my website kenmichaelsradio.com for that. On the home page, it'll lead you to the special contest page, which will tell you how to win. So that's coming up, and I should be interviewing the 2 authors, Laura Kortner and Dr. Bob. So they were already guests on things we said today, but I've got a lot of leftover questions and very important questions to repeat in my interview with them, which will be coming very soon. And every single week, there's Beatles trivia on my Beatles trivia and games page. You can win 1 of 10 prizes, books, CDs, and DVDs. Just like last week, there'll be another Let It Be trivia question. And this one's going to be one of my easiest trivia questions ever. And I'm going to put that up right after we finish here. So visit kenmichaelsradio.com. And don't forget, that's every single week we do the Beatles trivia thing.
Dr. Bob reminded me of a skit from Saturday Night Live during the 70s where they were backstage for a Kiss concert, and Bill Murray's character was trying to get in backstage, and then he's going through who he is, he's not on the list, and then all of a sudden here comes this guy with this tank of something and he goes, "I'm Dr. Bob," and he goes, "He's on the list, he's in."
You got a great memory for this stuff.
Wow. All right. Well, and Steve, anything doing? I don't want to leave you out.
I mean, after all you guys said, I mean, I think I'm going to get some gas tomorrow, maybe do some food shopping. I mean, now, actually, Kit mentioned something else, reviews. I actually write for them also.
Oh, cool.
And any minute, they will be posting my review of the new Pink Floyd reissue of A Momentary Lapse of Reason on vinyl.
Ooh.
So I'm looking forward to that. And I think I sent a link to all of you of recent stuff I've been doing for, it's called The Vinyl District. It's a website, and I'm a contributing editor there. And so I reviewed the Let It Be vinyl box set. I reviewed the Get Back book. Probably tomorrow, Wednesday, they'll post my review of the Paul McCartney lyrics book. And I think right after that, I don't know if you're aware that they've just reissued Encouraging Words, the Billy Preston album.
Yes, got that. Yep.
I have heard about that.
The second Apple album that he did. So I plan on reviewing that.
Excellent.
I just got that. I haven't sat down and listened to it. I'm really glad they reissued that. I mean, on vinyl especially. So that's really, and it's Billy's estate that more or less put the wheels in motion to have Universal Music put that out. I
Right.
don't think it's really something that
No,
Apple
it's a
kinda did.
limited release, and it was just a
Yeah.
for celebration for his being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I write pretty frequently for the Vinyl District. So
Oh, cool.
I've got a bunch of stuff that I've done for them over the last several. I reviewed the George Harrison, I think it was the 9 LP set.
Yeah.
My
Wow.
review is in there, and keeping busy. Not as busy as you folks.
Oh, you
I
sound
do
pretty-
tend to
pretty
sleep in
busy
the
to me.
evening. I get my 8 hours.
Oh my God. So it's the Vinyl District. It's the
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 name of the
Vinyl
site.
District. Right.
Okay,
Excellent.
and
Right.
Something Else Reviews, which
Something
we
Else
both write
Reviews.
for. So
Yep.
great. Excellent.
Cool.
All right. So I think that's the end of the road.
All
Any
right.
road. All right. So for Kit, Tom, Ken, and Steve, this is Joe Mayo saying, can't say what I'm doing here, but I hope to see much clearer after living in the material world.